If you ask New York City's mayor what lies behind a lot of the negativity and the divisiveness gripping this nation, he's got a simple answer for you. He says it's the media empire of Rupert Murdoch that's at fault. Bill de Blasio has long been a critic of the hometown New York Post newspaper. Murdoch has owned it for years. He says it's right-wing propaganda. Now he's also been talking about Fox News as well, of course, on a week when Laura Ingram's hateful comments are in the news. This critique of right-wing corporate media coming from the left may have appeal in the 2020 Democratic primary, but isn't it rather Trumpian? Mayor Bill de Blasio joins me now here on set. Mayor, thanks for coming over.
Thank you, Brian.
What is your critique of Murdoch? You were quoted recently by The Guardian saying, imagine the country if Murdoch had never had papers or networks here.
Right. We would be a more unified country. There would be less overt hate. There would be less appeal to racial division. I guarantee it, because what Murdoch did through Fox News and the New York Post, among others, is to create a dynamic where that stuff could come out in the open. We saw it in New York City for years and years, where race was infused into the dialogue in a very negative way, and it was a sort of an apocalyptic vision was created of the notion of going back to a time of crime and decay, and always putting that through a lens of people of color as the villains. Whether you're talking about Central Park 5 or so many other instances, certainly you saw that around the election of David Dinkins in New York, the way he was vilified by the Post throughout his mayoralty. But you've seen it on a national level as too. They don't just dog whistle, they go a lot farther than that. They put race front and center, and they try and stir the most negative impulses in this country. There is no Donald Trump without News Corp. I firmly believe that. He never gets to the presidency because he was never been elevated the way he was consistently for years and years. So I believe in a free, strong media with diverse views. I'll defend it with all I got. But we have to be able to call out when a particular company has a corporate agenda, has a political agenda, and has very effectively changed the American discourse. And by the way, when I was growing up with, I think, some real heroes of journalism, Walter Cronkite's an obvious one, and Murrow and so many others before him, they set a tone of evenness, respect. The civil rights movement of the 60s got a fair hearing because the American media gave them that opportunity to be heard. Today, you have one outlet and one outlet only that is constantly sowing division, and we should be able to talk about that.
So you'd rather not have the New York Post or Fox News exist?
Look, it's a free country. I'm saying because they exist, we've been changed for the worst. Now, if you said...
But isn't that like saying they're fake news or they're an enemy of the people?
No, because I think what the president has tried to do is create a dynamic that's anti-media, anti-free speech, undermining democratic norms. This is a president who doesn't really believe in democratic norms. It's quite clear. I believe in them deeply, and I believe in a free discourse.
Sure sounds like you feel anti-media feelings.
No, I feel anti-News Corp feelings. I feel very angry when I see a media outlet, a corporate giant, a profit-making giant, dividing people and creating hatred and negativity and changing our political landscape for the worse. Now, I think we have to be able to talk about that. We have to respect their constitutional rights, of course. But we also are consumers. We're also citizens. If we don't talk about it and they continue to do this to our country, something's wrong.
There's lots of media critics out there, but politicians make lousy media critics. Why do you feel it's your role to be calling out a newspaper because you don't like the content?
Because I think it's not happening enough. Now, I agree with you.
So you're doing it because nobody else is? Is that what
No,
you're
it's not
saying?
because no one else is. It's not happening the way I think it needs to. I agree with you. Anyone in public life, we're going to get criticized by all kinds of media, right, left, and center. And we have to respect it, and we have to take it, and we have to listen. By the way, even the New York Post sometimes writes a story on something happening with a government agency that proves to be right, and we have to address it. We have to fix it. But I think it's also fair to say that when you look at CNN, for example, you look at the major networks, they do not harbor a daily, hourly political agenda and bias. They provide both sides. It's part of their DNA. They may have some values and views. When it comes to News Corp, they have a political mission, and we have to be able to talk about it. So my
But
view
singling out News Corp, it's like Trump singling out CNN. Two wrongs don't make a right.
No,
two versions of something bad aren't.
Couldn't disagree more. CNN on a regular basis provides both sides of the story. CNN, you could try and find some politics in CNN, but it does not even come close to resembling the clear political agenda of News Corp. Now, again, to your core point, why should we talk about it? Because it's changing our lives, and if we don't talk about it, how do we address it?
Look, I had staffers at the New York Post this week say to me, you are doing exactly what Donald Trump does.
Couldn't be more untrue.
So you think it's a false equivalency?
Unbelievably false.
But two things can be bad, even if they're not equal. They can both be bad.
Okay, so let's break it down. If one agrees, and look at the facts over decades, does News Corp have a clear right-wing agenda? I think that one's pretty obvious. Do they sensationalize, racialize, and divide? Yes. Does that compare to CNN, NBC, CBS, ABC, the New York Times, Washington Post? No, one of these things is not like the other. They have a right to exist, but we also have a right to confront what they're doing to our country and not simply stand idly by because we
fear
but
if
a
Post
comparison to
staffers
Trump.
say that makes me feel unsafe leaving my building in Midtown Manhattan, isn't that a problem?
It's not a problem if you say we respect all media, we defend all media's rights, but we also have to be able to say if a media outlet is affecting the national discourse in a certain way. We can't.
Are you doing
confuse
this
the two.
because you want to run for president in 2020?
I am mayor of New York City. I'm going to continue to be. My term goes to 2021.
Because I think Bernie Sanders hit on a vein when he attacked the corporate media in 2016. It makes me wonder if you view this as a wedge issue or a campaign issue.
I've been talking about the corporate media since the 1980s.
That's true.
Okay,
you have been.
so
you have been.
so the
Let's
fact
go through
is,
some examples actually, because some of what you said about the tabloids I thought was pretty hurtful. Here's some of what you've said according to private emails that were leaked out, released by a court order actually. At one point you said the news media is pitiful, saying it's sad for our city and nation. You accused the New York Times of bias. Another point you said maybe if the New York Daily News went online only, that would be good for us. But now the Daily News has had to lay off half its staff. Isn't that hurting our city?
What I was calling out is the sensationalism, which I think has infected the Daily News too much as well, which creates a bad civic discourse. We want a respectful, high-road, intelligent civic discourse. What I think has happened to tabloid culture has actually created a lot of division in my city and a lot of obscuring of some of the bigger issues affecting millions of people. We have a massive income inequality crisis in our city. But if you look at the tabloid approach, it takes the attention off of that and on to, unfortunately, a lot of the divisions that exist, particularly along the lines of race. I want to see that fixed. But I also believe the Daily News plays an absolutely crucial role. I would like it sold to someone who cares about New York City. Tronc, its parent corporation, does not. They don't want real, insightful reporting. They don't want the Daily News to dig into everyday stories of everyday New Yorkers. They want a profit. They're laying off half the newsroom. That's unacceptable, too. So I hope you can hear that I believe in a free, strong media, diverse views. But that doesn't mean we should be silent on the outcomes of some of the approaches if they are specifically for an agenda. And that's what gets me back to News Corp. I don't accuse the Daily News or the New York Times of having that kind of agenda. I sometimes say the New York Times takes an elite view of the world too often. I don't think that's a news flash. But I respect what they do, and I respond to what they do. But if we have a force in our society that has fundamentally changed us, just again, think of that equation. A world without News Corp, a world with the kind of reporting, both sides, and a real devotion to objectivity that was the norm up through the 1970s in this country, what would we look like today? I guarantee you Donald Trump would not be president, and I guarantee you that what we're seeing today in Washington, the right and the alt-right and the negativity and the division coming out in the fore and feeling it has license, that wouldn't be true. And that's good when those forces don't feel they have license.
I still think politicians make lousy media critics.
We
though.
may, but if you're someone who has a belief system, as I do, you can't stay silent if you see something not being recognized. It's not the same. And this is part of my argument. You know, sometimes when I've made this criticism, people have tried to say we have to defend the Post with everyone else. I defend the right to exist. But can we not acknowledge that they are different than essentially every other outlet out there? And in a world where we almost saw Sinclair take another huge step forward and build its empire, and we can also see some of the same tendencies in Sinclair towards clear political agenda infecting news reporting, that should be a concern for all Americans. Separating editorial from reporting. I think that's a pretty core American civic value that does not happen at Fox, that does not happen at News Corp.
Mayor, thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate it.